I believe private enterprise is the most powerful force on the planet, and that if everyone that's in a leadership position can just take on one thing in the world, right, that we can actually really truly have impact. And, to me, no one else is doing it. Like I look at the world and I don't see a lot of really productive things going on in the world for good. And so if every single enterprise, every single team took on one small challenge, then the amount of impact we could have on the planet is enormous.
Hello, and welcome to the Show Your Value podcast, where we explore the art of value creation in three macro buckets: material value creation, emotional energy value creation, and spiritual value creation. I'm your host, Lee Benson, and today my very special guest is Michael J. McFall. Mike is the co-founder and co-CEO of BIGGBY Coffee, one of the fastest growing coffee franchises in the United States. Despite not having an MBA or being a workaholic, McFall has built his career through hard work and real-world experience. He prioritizes people and purpose over business jargon and fancy presentations, and his pragmatic solutions are forged from this philosophy. Mike understands that people are the most important ingredient in any successful enterprise, and he helps employers create a purpose-driven business that will transform the world and improve people's lives. There's so much more I could say there. You've got a couple of books, Grind and Grow. We'll get into that a bit. But Mike, thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Lee. This is great.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while now. So to kind of start it off, so you went from a barista in store number one, I believe it was 1996, to today, co-founder, co-CEO. And it got me, sort of wondering, where did you develop this drive to create so much, what I'm calling holistic value in the world?
Well, the driving force for me has always been the opportunity to wake up and do interesting things in my life, in that day, right? Just every day I want to wake up and have interesting stuff going on. So, to me, entrepreneurship, being an entrepreneur, as you know, I mean, it's one of the most interesting things I think that you can do in the world, right? Which is bring value to the world through a business startup, right? And that's what we do as entrepreneurs. We solve hard problems, we bring value, and we get paid for solving those problems, right? So, but that really the root of my journey here is really just about, today I'm 26 years, 27 years into it. And I still get to wake up and do really interesting things every day. And I love that.
Yeah, that's so great. What was that journey like, going from barista to, being at the top of this pretty amazing organization?
Well, it's been a long, slow journey. So, we learned along the way, and it's just one step at a time. I had a conversation with a gentleman this past week who wants to get into his own enterprise, and I said, to me, so much of what we do in business is just common sense. Stepping up when you need to step up as the leader and the entrepreneur, bringing value to the organization when and where the organization needs it. And so, you learn as you go, in my opinion. And that's what we did. There's no class to teach you how to do this. I mean, I don't know if you agree with that, but I actually teach a class in entrepreneurship, and it's sometimes it's hard for me because I really struggle. Like, am I bringing value to these students where they could actually think about and possibly become an entrepreneur? Like, I don't know,
I think this is a lot like if you could give yourself, and people ask this question, right? If you could give yourself advice when you were, 18 or 20 or, pick some early age, what would you tell them? And let's say you're 50, 60 and later in life, and then they have this very thoughtful answer. It's just so incredible. Then I say, okay, now what could you tell them they could actually hear? And that's the challenge, I think, that you have when you're talking to students. What can you tell them that they can hear given where they're at that time? Because you're describing your 28-ish year overnight success story here. This doesn't just happen. It evolves into it. So, yeah, I've always thought if I took myself from 5 years ago and put myself in the seat today with a company that I'm running, I'd probably make some pretty big mistakes because I didn't grow into it.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how you feel, but a lot of times I get nervous about talking about the startup phase. You're more of a serial entrepreneur than I am. So you're much closer to it, in all the startups that you've done and the successful startups. But for me, I worry that I might give bad advice at this point to somebody who's in startup because, I'm a very different person, as you just said. I'm a very different person today than I was when I went through the startup moment. And in a franchise company, we get to see startup constantly. That's one of the nice things about our business is we get to be in that startup. But, I do have insecurity around that, I'm really cautious and try not to, give people weird advice based on the fact that I'm 28 years in and have built a company that's more of a company now than a startup for sure.
Yeah. Well, I feel the same. And, going back to, I took a few notes here from the books, but going back to grind, the leading indicator of success in a startup business is the founder. It's their perspective. There's so much that goes into that. And I feel like we can't give bad advice if we're talking about that state. We're not telling them, go do this. And when it fails, they can blame Mike. It's not that. But I feel like your advice is more around how to think about it. And then it's really up to them. But talk about that concept. I totally agree. It's a huge leading indicator.
Well, I think, what I tried to do in chapter 1 of both books was this concept called due diligence on you. Because I do believe that the most important ingredient in any organization, no matter what size, is the leader. The most important ingredient on a team is the leader. And so doing due diligence on yourself, it's not about whether you can or can't be a successful entrepreneur. It is about evaluating your strengths, your weaknesses, understanding your strengths, leveraging those, understanding your weaknesses, supplementing those. That's really what we need to do as leaders, in my opinion, as we approach our teams and as our organizations. I mean, nobody has the full toolbox. There's no one person that is the preeminent or pre-ultimate entrepreneur. And so the rest of us have to, we have to really evaluate and think about what we need. I mean, I know the stuff that I'm just not very good at. And I know the stuff that is more of my strengths. And so that's really what those chapters are about, is evaluating. And what I try to bring in grind is what's the ethos of startup. And if there's one criticism of that book, people have read it and said, well, boy, I feel like you're telling me that I shouldn't try to be an entrepreneur or that it's too hard or whatever. And I was like, well, if you're reading this book and it's scaring you a little, A, I think that's a good thing. But B, cool. Like you've got some stuff to consider, and that's really, the idea behind the book is, the theory behind the book is if I was sitting with a good dear friend of mine at my picnic table in my backyard talking about what business startup would be like, and I really care about that person, what would I say to them? And that was the mindset I took into writing that book.
I thought it was great, and my perspective is probably different than most. We'll see what you think around this. But working really hard and struggling like crazy in the early days of a startup business, that's where we develop. And I've learned actually to trust the struggle, that when it's really hard and everything's going sideways and you're almost going out of business 15 times in the first year, I get this warm feeling inside that this is going to be so amazing when I come out the other side and my internal fulfillment's going to go through the roof. That's how I think about it, because a lot of leaders today that I work with, something goes a little bit wrong and they act like a whiny little victim. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, why would we need a leader if the world was perfect? This is the highest level leadership work you can do, is bringing chaos together around that. Talk about that a little bit, because I think it's just part of the job, and it can be a lot of fun. It doesn't have to be, you talk about negativity in the book too, but it doesn't have to be that.
That's exactly where I go with it, Lee, is that I think great leaders, especially in the chaos of startup, and how I always approached it was it's a really sophisticated game. And you're trying to, and it can be fun. You're trying to win the game, right? Whatever, define win however you want. But like and so when you go into a day or a week that's really, really hard, yeah, of course, when you're playing a game, there are going to be those moments. And then there's going to be the victories, right, inside of a game. And so that's the mentality and I still am playing the game, this game of BIGGBY Coffee today, right? And it's so invigorating and exciting today to be playing this game. It's not as hard as it was, but in startup and that's how I never got down, like I never got exhausted. I never blamed other people. I shouldn't say I never got exhausted. I got exhausted, of course, but I never blamed other people. It was always just some part of the game that we were in the middle of playing. And I love that, and I watch people who go down these deep, dark holes of negativity. And it's like, but what did you expect? Like, of course it's going to be hard. And that's when you got to be resilient. That's when you got to really show up and that's how you win the game, is showing up in those moments and getting through it.
Yeah. Some people would say, oh, it's super risky having your own business. And, I thought about it this way when I started my first, my first real business, Mike, was a rock and roll band in the 80s.
Nice.
I don't count it. But my gosh, we played over 1,000 nights is how I earned most of my money. And we hired rhythm sections and we had sound crew, light crew managers, all of that. But the way I thought about it is, there's always a way to get there. It's going to be hard. And, a lot like with the kids today, with the best of intentions, I think many parents have taken all the struggle away from the kids and not ready for adulthood. There was no struggle. And so and I look at it and say, hey, you know what? We need to give our kids the healthy struggles they need to be successful in life, and working backwards from what's the ideal characteristics of this amazing human we're going to launch into adulthood when they graduate high school. What does it look like? Are we preparing them for that? Are they going through the right struggles? What's the difference on this side and struggling getting into learning how to run a business? And when it comes to that, it's all about, to me, creating value. And if you create value, then you'll make it. You'll be a nice going concern. You could be huge in scale and be the less than 0.1% that gets to $100 million or whatever that is. But for sure, you can make it 95+% of the time. And I often wonder, Mike, if a lot of folks, since they don't have this value creation mindset, they're not really creating the value that they agreed to create in the companies they work for. But I've always felt way more secure working for myself than working, especially for a big company that could lay off the whole division and it has nothing to do with me.
Yeah, I've never had the right sort of gauge on risk, because the stuff that I see and do that other people would say is risky doesn't feel risky to me at all. A lot we make a lot of investments inside the business and so on. And it's just the stuff you have to do. Sure. Could you pull that money out of the business and put it away someplace safe? But that, to me, that's the worst idea, right? Like the business is beautiful. The business is growing. Like, we should just continuously be reinvesting and putting it back in. And so none of that even feels risky to me. And I agree with you on the employment side. No one can fire me. If I can wake up tomorrow morning and I can sell one more cup of coffee tomorrow, I say that's one of my favorite things about startup and being an entrepreneur, is that there's no ceiling. If I can figure out how to sell one more cup of coffee tomorrow, that's on me to figure out how to do that. And, until the SEC gets involved or whatever in terms of monopolistic behavior, like, let us all have that problem, right? And so, I don't actually even know if it's the SEC, but that's one thing I love about it. I was fortunate to know Fred DeLuca from Subway, and he started Subway with one sandwich shop. And I think he died at 44,000 sandwich shops, and I just think of that, like he just kept building and growing and building and growing. And it's one of the things that I think, and yet you'd be interesting to talk to about this one, because, the shiny, what's that called about entrepreneurs? The next shiny thing, right? And I've always believed that that's a real problem, right? Like you've gone through and you've built and exited. And I think that's a different model. Like I think a lot of entrepreneurs get into something and then get distracted and don't actually build that original company. Right. And I look at somebody like Fred DeLuca or, the Amazon story, or these beautiful stories where they started and they just kept building. And that's and I love that, right? Just sell one more tomorrow.
Yeah, there's a lot of great stories out there. I recently had Howard Behar on my podcast. And of course, he started with Starbucks when they were about 26 stores, I think.
Oh, nice.
And wow, did they take it. I mean, we're all going on these value creation journeys. But to your point, I actually had T-shirts made up that say, do less, better. And I remember as I was growing my aerospace business, the more we kept shrinking the number of core products we had, the faster we grew, the more profitable we were, the better product and service and value for our customers became, like all of it. And this is a challenge across the board. Oh my gosh. I work, so my current business, Execute to Win, ETW. I work with startups that have an idea that isn't anywhere close to proven, but they love it. And okay, well, let's fix that. All the way up to $60 billion plus market cap public companies. They all have the same shiny object problem. And even at the top end, the larger companies, they'll have a strategic planning deck they'll give me, and they'll hire us to come in and help them execute on strategy. And there could be 100 to 200 strategic initiatives. But when you really look at it, there's only 4 things, maybe 5 things max, that create 80+% of the value for the organization. And we're not doing them very well. Why are we doing that other stuff? And so this whole concept of make sure the stuff you have, you talk about selling it, customers, the product has to be amazing. Let's make sure that's 10 out of 10 before we think about adding anything new. So you and I are fully aligned. I really like reading that in books. Yeah.
Yeah. It's, I tell people my story was, I was a franchise salesman for 17 years. That's what I did. I mean, and I want people to hear that, right? Like it wasn't 17 months. It wasn't 3 years. I was a hardcore franchise salesman. That was my function in the business. I had a few other things I was responsible for. But my primary focus was selling franchises for 17 years. And that's how we built it, was that level of focus. I mean, I woke up every single day and I just tried to, make the mousetrap better so it'd be easier to sell franchises. And then I sold the franchises. And that's a huge part of my story right there.
Yeah. Yeah. You went from, I think it was north of $350,000 investment to get to cash flow positive down to under $200,000. Have you refined it more? Are there opportunities to get it even lower?
We're in an upswing right now, pretty dramatically. A big part of our model are these, they're modular drive-thrus. And so we're implementing this drive-thru only concept. The difficulty for us in that drive-thru only concept is that the site work to get the property ready for the modular drive-thru that lands, it varies dramatically in terms of what it costs. So that and it is expensive to get that done, right? You start talking about laying cement and utility work and it can be, especially if you start talking about curb cuts and so on, it gets really expensive really fast. And then plus just there's inflationary pressure over the last couple of years in terms of build out. So yeah, we're battling that right now. I actually had a long conversation about that this morning, about how to approach that and how to approach it from a systemic way, not just we need to figure out the processes that'll bring is it about bringing the cost down? I mean, ultimately, yes, but it's more about truly understanding what is the cost and what's adding to the cost and so on. And so we've been pretty deep into that for the better part of 6 months. But yes, this is many years ago when I went and hired my own architect and my own contractor, started building the stores myself, for the better part of 2 years, and took the cost from, plus 300 down to under 200. Yeah. It was awesome.
Yeah. Well, one of the many things I loved about going through the books is that you said something to the effect of being a really good steward of your franchisees' capital.
Yeah.
And so you're focusing like 100% on their success. And so many seem to be caught up in we got paid and move on.
That's a
little bit. Yeah.
That's a huge issue in franchising as a business model. And there are people that start franchises, they heat them up and they try to sell as many as they can. And they don't really look at the performance of the unit, 2 to 5 years down the road. And that's not their quest. Their quest is to get a bunch open and probably go through some kind of a liquidity event or whatever. But this all came from Fred DeLuca. He was a mentor of ours, and that's what he brought that to me so hard. He hit me over the head with it. I remember where we were sitting. We were in a store in West Lansing, and he said, "Hey, what's your job? What's your responsibility, Mike?" And I fumbled all over the place, talking about marketing and talking about operations and build out and real estate. And he said, "Yeah, no, I know. Those are the duties. That's what you do. But what's your responsibility?" I got it wrong again. And he said, "Listen, you have one thing that you have to be focused on, and that's keeping your franchise owners' capital safe first, and then growing it." And that was just powerful for me. And, I think we were always good at that. I think it was always, in our DNA. But that made it really come into focus for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think this applies to every business, right? We have to make our customers successful. Even back in my aerospace days, how can we continually and safely reduce aircraft operating costs so they are mission ready 100% of the time that they want to be? And we always beat our competitors that didn't focus on that. It seemed like a lot of them were more interested in rigging the game, like locking them so they have to work with them regardless of service. And it's like, oh my gosh, no wonder we're kicking your butt.
Yeah. Yeah. And to me, there's a lot of personal responsibility around all of that, because you have people who bring a big portion of their life savings in and make an investment in our brand. And, that if I wasn't doing everything possible to keep that investment safe and to grow it, I couldn't sleep at night. I know we're trying as hard as we can. And we're doing the best we possibly can. So that's how I sleep at night. Even when we have failures, even when stores don't work, I know we're doing the best we can.
Yeah, Mike, when I think about holistic value creation, so there's the material piece that should be cultivated. We need more resources to have a bigger impact to do all this stuff. The emotional energy piece, to me, is the X factor for leaders. How do you show up? What does it feel like? You talk about a lot of that in your books as well. And then the spiritual piece in the context of an organization, to me, is about being connected to something bigger. And so we've got the team members, the suppliers, the customers, the communities that we touch. So if you're only creating value and you're cultivating like crazy on the material side, that's great, do that. But if it's out of balance with the emotional energy and spiritual side, that's where it goes sideways. And I believe that's what we're talking about here. And the net effect of value created, even a company that's making, let's say you've got 5 billion in revenue and making $1 billion or more in profit, the net effect on the world can be negative because of how you're damaging the other side and you're not keeping those things in balance. I feel like, again, you and I, as I go into your books and watch some of your interviews, we're talking about the same thing. How's that land on you?
Well, I think that my quest in the next 10 to 20 years is to prove out, using your language, the energy and the spiritual uh, side of leadership, that when you're fully engaged in cultivating the right energy and culture, and I can get into all of that in terms of like how I believe that should be done. But my quest is to prove out that when you get those pieces right, you actually grow the material side more quickly. And, there is evidence out there. I haven't spent a ton of time, diving into it yet. That is going to be the topic of my next book, right? So, my second book was really about the stability of the team, getting the business to the point where it is a stable enterprise, sustainable, going to be there. The next book is, I want to prove that out, right? That leadership to me does involve the community, evaluating your impact on the world as a whole, environmentally, looking at how you're impacting your people and their holistically, not just how they show up at work, but how you impact them and holistically. And how do they, when they go home at night, how do they treat their families? How do they, are they volunteering? Do they feel good about what's going on? And a lot of that, there's a great story of a guy by the name of Matt Ishbia, here in Michigan. And, he's built a company called United Wholesale Mortgage. And I went to a presentation he gave. He's a member of YPO in our chapter, and he had an event at his place. And it was for members only, like it was only the YPO group. So he was pretty frank and earnest with us, and, he focused on this piece of how does the individual leave and go home? And he felt in his cases is that when you left, you were more fulfilled, more invigorated when you went home than when you came in the morning. And if you can pull that off as a leader, you're getting the magic right. And he learned all of that from Tom Izzo and the basketball team at Michigan State where he played. Right. So, but I believe that, and that's, to me, when you get all those pieces right, that the material side grows exponentially beyond what you could ever do in a sort of a zero-sum game, right?
Yeah. Well, that's 100% my experience, and I've always thought that way. Everything I do is about what's best for the entity, and culture, actually connecting culture to value creation holistically, has always been my number one job as I go through. We even run something I call Execute Masterminds now. They're CEO mastermind groups, but it's all about holistic value creation, applying my methodology that I developed around it. And I talk about that in my first book, Your Most Important Number. And it's amazing to watch it go. Like, everybody's growing faster because they're applying it this way. There's absolutely no question. I think the challenge, Mike, is that when people talk about culture and doing all these things that are correct, and it's literally, this is my experience. And I work with a lot of different companies, and I've hundreds and hundreds of teams, thousands of leaders over the years. It's 95% virtue signaling. They don't even know what they're talking about. And what I'm getting from you is that, you're on the similar journey just from a different angle that I am, and that we want to discover what it really takes to objectively, measurably do that. Like, we put these things in place, you watch what happens on the material side and growth really in value in all three of the buckets.
Yeah, I think, where it starts for me is the teams. We need to build teams within our organizations that, and this, to me, this is where it all begins, that these teams are a loving, nurturing, supportive environment where people can bring their full self, their full creativity to their work. And if we do that, and we can build a trusting environment within our teams, then we can start to really challenge these teams to start to do epic things. And so for me, that's the starting point. is when when leaders engage their people, they have to create this safe environment where people can show up. They're, and I think that, if you don't get that piece right, I think you struggle anywhere else in the business. And so that's, to me, that's the starting point of it. And then you go from there.
Yeah. And as I'm listening to you, for me, it's about productive engagement. People will often talk about, in the HR space or CEOs, I want, more engagement. And so they'll do a survey. How engaged do you feel on a scale from 1 to whatever? Mm-hmm. And they go, oh, this is what's actually happening. I go, oh my gosh, if you have to run a survey, you have no idea what's going on in the business. And I'm looking for, and I'll always ask the question back, engage with what, right? Engage with what? So we want productive engagement to create more and more value over time. And I believe the number one job of the top leader in an organization is to continually increase the value of the organization and accelerate that over time. And there may be one number like, EBITDA or cash flow that kind of measures that, and it should drive all the right behaviors in the organization. But that won't grow, to your point, unless you're getting the emotional energy and spiritual piece right. Yeah. Just you can't really sustain it over time. So with that and sort of infusing, in the culture, this whole value creation piece of it, I think that's the magic sauce, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't, when you look at, there's two ways to increase value. If you're looking at it from an EBITDA perspective, it's either drive revenue or reduce costs. And it's a very simple equation. And the cost cutting side is finite, right? So then you have to get into the real way to drive value is to grow the organization, to grow the revenue stream. And how you do that is through creative, powerful people engaging the work. And I don't know if you're familiar with a concept called the DDO, a deliberately developmental organization, but the idea there is that you use work for people as the challenge, that they the aggressive engagement of work is the challenge for them to grow personally. And so they come to work every day, and there's a team of people with them, around them, supporting them in their own personal growth. Now, personal growth, professional growth, I don't differentiate, right? I think you have to grow as a human being to grow professionally too, right? But work is the challenge, because if you're sitting at home watching Netflix with a bowl of popcorn, there's not a lot of opportunity to grow there. It's when you show up to work and you've got these. So we need to build these pods, and I call it petri dishes of self-improvement is what work can be. And so you have these pods of people that are working together every day, supporting each other in their own personal development on the quest that is the objective and goal for the team, for the organization. And that's how you end up with people really driving a team forward. And your job as the facilitator of the group, the leader of the group, is to make sure that everyone in the group has the what they need, and then you facilitate the relationships and make sure everything is healthy and everybody can move forward together. And you just watch productivity just soar.
Yeah, I think it's great. I often get asked, if I have any advice for external team building things that they can do to get their, teams more engaged. And like, well, wait a minute, why isn't work that way? To your point, and everything.
Right. Exactly.
That should be it. No more trust falls and paying all the money for somebody to come in and go through that. Create that and make every employee feel like they're the CEO of their own role in the business.
Yeah. And I like what advice I give to a leader that wants to create that kind of a culture is they have to live it first. And how you live that culture is by, showing vulnerability, exposing stuff that you're nervous about or insecure about in the business, bringing people into that important conversation. Also exposing what you're working on to your people. these are the things that I want to be doing this year as an example in terms of my growth. And when you have to show that vulnerability first, and then that allows other people to be vulnerable. And then you also have the other pieces in order to build trust in, because you have to have trust in these environments, right? In order to build trust, you have to trust yourself. You have to trust people first, right? In order to build trust. And so, they're pretty fundamental things, but I see people being too scared to take some of those steps when in leadership, and the being vulnerable, talking about your imperfections, what you're working on, bringing people into the messy conversations, admitting that you don't know everything, that kind of stuff. You have to take those steps first before you can expect anybody on your team to do the same.
Yeah. I call it full contact value creation. Get everybody in the game, all the good stuff, the bad stuff, sideways stuff. It's all there. And everybody has the best intent with integrity to move forward and create as much value as we possibly can.
Yeah.
And you can't, to your point, in the first year or two, you can't just hire somebody once you start a business and then walk away and do whatever you want and everything's going to be great, right?
Well, you can. I just think your expectations of what the company's going to do need to be pretty limited. I think. I mean, who knows? You could get lucky, I guess, and it's probably worked. But to me, the organizations that I've seen thrive are the ones that you've got the entrepreneur in it, working it. We are now out of running the day to day of our business, but at the same time, and we're 27 years into the thing, so, but you can't do that too early. I agree.
Yeah. You've gone from, how did you say it in one of the podcasts I listened to, from chaos to calm, and we can all do that, right?
Yeah. That's the idea. Yeah. Book 2, Grow, is, I want to pick people up in that. It's kind of my book series is this linear progression, and book 1 takes you from concept, when you first, engage and commit to a concept, to your first days of cash flow. Then from that, which I define as the bootstrapping entrepreneurial phase, it looks like the business is going to make it. You've got revenue. You have a few dollars of profit, right? I want to go from that to sustainability, which, how I'm defining that is that you are irrelevant to the future success of the organization. And that's a really big learning curve. I mean, you have to learn how to be a leader, and then you have to unlearn all the things that you were doing as the leader to begin to allow other people to take over. And that, to me, is the harder transition. If you want to put a leadership team in place, put a CEO in place, and step away, that is a very difficult transition for most entrepreneurs.
Everything that I've started from scratch has taken anywhere from 3 to 7 years to really get traction.
There you go.
And you'd think you'd get better and better at it. It's sort of interesting. This is kind of what it takes, especially if you're solving something that's really challenging to solve for. So managing expectations and going through that and enjoy the healthy struggle to be able to create more value and do this again and again if you want to.
Do you have an outcome in place when you start?
Name the end game. I love how you talk about that. I could always see 5-6 years into the future. And then every year that went on, I could see another 5-6 years in the future about what's possible. And, right now you and I share a pretty big global outcome that we're looking for, and that I would like to take the culture, let's say the United States, and then let's infect the world with it in a good way, to be a value creation culture where we're thinking about holistic value creation. Because I believe, in this world, you're creating measurable, real, objective value in the world in those 3 buckets, or you're taking value out of the world by usually trying to rig the game in some way. And it happens at the micro to macro, levels out there. And so that's what I'm thinking about with where I'm going in my current business, ETW, and I've got a few others, but this is the one that I really think will make the difference. And I'd love to have more conversations about your upcoming book on maybe collaborating on the approach. Let's get
Cool.
more of us working together on this thing. And so why is it important? Selfishly, I want to live in an amazing world as I'm aging out, right? I love dystopian future movies, but I don't want to live in Mad Max 20 years from now because we didn't get this right.
Yeah. That's a beautiful outcome. That's a beautiful, and that's the outcome you're envisioning for ETW.
For the world and its impact. Yeah. This concept of value creation. So I've already impacted and continue to impact hundreds of organizations that are using my operating methodology. And I understand from you in your second book, you're a fan of an intentional operating methodology as well. I have something called the MIND methodology. And more and more companies that use this, I kind of see 10 years out, there's over 1,000 chairs with 3 or 4 groups of 8 each. This will make a dent, right? It'll drive this concept of holistic value creation out there. So, talk more about how you want to change the culture in the world, going forward, because we're talking about the same thing. Then I'm going to dig back to the beginning again here.
Yeah, I think, what I believe is that I believe private enterprise is the most powerful force on the planet. And that if everyone that's in a leadership position in private enterprise can just take on one thing in the world, right? One that we can actually really, truly have impact. And, to me, no one else is doing it. Like I look at the world and I don't see a lot of really productive things going on in the world for good. And so we have all the resources. We have I don't want to say we have all the smart people, but generally, the private enterprise has the smartest people and the most resources and so on. Great. And then what? So now we need to impact the world. And if every single enterprise, every single team took on one small challenge, then the amount of impact we could have on the planet is enormous, and that's what I hope, because when you talk about challenges at work, building profitable widgets to make a shareholder more money and wealthier, that can be one of the values you're creating. But people that show up to work, I believe, are inspired by things like, what is your purpose? Why are we doing this? How are we going to improve the human condition through our team, our work, and so on? And so, those aren't two different things. You create value, you can create shareholder value and have real positive impact on the world.
Yeah. And I find that people won't keep them in balance. You can be all on the profit side or all on the purpose side.
Yeah.
And the purpose side, again, back to virtue signaling. Well, it can't be about the money, but it usually is about the money to some degree, if not a very large degree.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. That's a huge part of starting a company and building a business. So yeah, I mean, we are aggressive about advocating for the shareholder whenever we talk about this kind of work.
Yeah. If we want to have bigger impact, we need more resources. Please help us cultivate material value creation so we can drive the spiritual connectedness, community value creation on the other side, and use emotional energy value creation as the X factor to improve all of that, supercharge, all of that out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Want to go back to the beginning a little bit. I think a lot of, listeners that have a small business, thinking about starting up a business, and, just to say it the way you talk about it in Grind, sell more shit. And I see that that's the biggest obstacle that most founders have. They're afraid to go sell, and then they start doing all of these things, I think, because it makes them feel like they're accomplishing something, but that has nothing to do with selling. So talk about that a little bit. You're so right on.
Well, my equation is you have to put 80% of your energy into generating revenue. And that's I'm talking through startup, through the entrepreneurial bootstrapping phase for a very long time. 80% of your energy has to go into revenue generation. And I didn't give up selling franchises for a long time, right? And I just kept growing, and I was obsessed with growing and improving and getting better and so on. And I am amazed too. There's this, I work with a lot of engineering students that take my class in entrepreneurship. And there's this notion that if they just build the product perfect, if they just get the product perfect, then people will want to buy it. And, getting the product right before you're selling it is nearly impossible. And that's a piece I don't think they can lock in on that piece, which is when you take a product to market, you have no idea what that product's going to look like in the end. Your customer is going to buy it from you, and then they're going to create your product with you ultimately. And so that to me is, you can't focus on the product too much. You gotta get the product out, then you gotta get the consumer engaging your product and understand why they're buying it or why they're not buying it, and then move forward, right? With improving it, iterating, and so on. The great stories that I love, Calvin Klein, I think it was, Calvin Klein, was asked, how much planning and you guys were trying to develop these products, and you ultimately ended up being this designer. And he said, "Hey, listen, this was the first 5 years of my business. We sold a lot of coats." And that was it, right? That's how Calvin Klein started. He had a coat. I mean, you remember that the Calvin Klein, I think it was members only or something. Yeah. He just said, that's what he said. He goes, "We sold a lot of coats. That's what we did." And the basis of that coat then became his opportunity to invest in, to have the resources, as you call it, to invest in other things and do other things and so on. But the whole Calvin Klein, enterprise was started from just selling coats, right? That's all they did. And so that to me is, that's, our mission statement is wake up and sell one more cup of coffee tomorrow than we did today. Period. Right. And that's what we do. That gives us, that's the economic engine that runs everything, is we got to wake up and we got to sell more cups of coffee tomorrow than we did today.
Yeah, I love that. And we're pointing to two of the biggest challenges for small business owners and startup entrepreneurs. They're afraid to sell, and they love their stuff way more than they've confirmed that the marketplace will like their stuff.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And I think the selling thing, I think that comes down to, it's hard to be told no, especially something that you believe in. You believe in it so much, and to be told no, it's hard to take that. Whenever anybody asks me, "Hey, what should I, what, if I wanted to prepare to be an entrepreneur, what should I do?" And I've got two pieces of advice. One, take a bookkeeping class, because for a long time, all it is keeping your money organized and understanding what's happening with your money. And so take a bookkeeping class, not advanced accounting, not finance. We don't need to be dealing with, all these, factors and algorithms and all. It's just bookkeeping. Keep it organized. And then two, take a straight commission sales job. Wake up in the morning and sell something and you eat. Wake up in the morning and you don't sell something and you don't eat. There is no better preparation for entrepreneurship than that right there. And if you can wake up in the morning and you can get out there and you can hustle and you can sell, that's a huge part of being successful in business and in startup.
Yeah, and your numbers are out there for the world to see. It either happened or it didn't. There's a huge accountability function.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
mean, I love that game. That's, but sales. I've never been ashamed of selling. I've always thought it was just sort of the heart and soul of an organization. The sales team, They're closer to the customer than anybody else. They hear the no's, they hear the yeses, they get the critiques. I think every organization should be highly focused on their sales team and getting the information from them. If you're not selling, you don't need anything else, you know?
Yeah, I've not only never stopped selling in any of my businesses, including today, I've never stopped being on the front lines virtually daily with our customers. I want to know what's going on. I mean, you talk about that. It's, what was it, 6 hours a day? The managers have to be in the store and doing all that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's 6 hours. So that was in our franchise contract. It's no longer there, which I fought for, but I lost that argument. Our new chief development officer wanted to take it out because she felt like we were losing a lot of people just based on that requirement alone, and that didn't necessarily need to be, a restriction. So, but I still believe in it, and I would put it back in if it were up to me, but it's not. And that is, you have to spend 6 hours on the floor in the store working one of our 3 positions with an apron on, no cell phone, just doing the work for your first year. And then, after that, then I feel like you've got a good enough base built, and it's only a year, right? Like, that's not a very long time. And so that was definitely, one of the things that I think that clause in our franchise agreement, I think that was one of the competitive advantages we had in franchising, is that we had that requirement, and we insisted that people live up to it.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it still says highly recommended in there. And
yeah, right.
For decades, I've been still doing it. I still sell, and every day I'm on the front line with clients. Already was today, will be again this afternoon. And I love being in the room. I feel like so many of the experts out there these days are so far removed from what they're talking about. They couldn't do that thing in the real world to save themselves anymore.
Yeah.
And you're paying money to listen to them, right?
Yeah. Well, I always sleep at night because I still believe that I could wake up in the morning and make any one of our coffee shops successful. I believe that, right? And I think I have to have that belief in order to continue to grow and sell franchises. If I ever thought that the mousetrap was not functioning well enough that I could step in and that I could build a successful business there, then I think it's time to pack it in, right? And so it's always been very important to me that I was a good operator, and that I knew that I could operate stores well, and I knew how to do that, and again, that helped me sleep at night, right? And if I still believe too that if a franchise owner comes in and follows our system, engages the community in a healthy way, they can make their store successful. I believe that in the marrow of my bones.
Yeah. Yeah. This concept of, and you're such an amazing laboratory experiment case study in how you think about it. But this concept of, here is a product, and here are all the tools, here are all the processes. Some people will be wildly successful with it, and the more you improve that, the larger percentage will be, but a few will fail miserably. What's the difference between those two entrepreneurs?
Well, attitude. It's attitude. I had a really interesting interview with a gentleman last year, Jeff Sloan. Do you know Startup Nation? Have you heard of Startup Nation? It's cool. He's been around forever, and he's a journalist, first and foremost, but we did our interview. We got done with the interview, and then we were just sitting talking afterward. And he said, Mike, I don't know, man. I've interviewed 1,000 people. He goes, I'm not sure I've ever met somebody that makes this look easier than you have. Right. And he said, what do you think that's about? And I didn't have an answer, Lee. I've never even thought about that. I've never even thought that it's easy. I do what I do. And so I came back to my office, and I stewed on that for a couple of days, and I called him back, and I said, Jeff, I've got an answer for the question you presented. And I said, I think it's attitude. The whole concept of it being a game, and it being an interesting, fun game. Right. And I believe tomorrow's going to be better than today. I just do. I always have, and I hope I always will. Right. And so, this idea of optimism, and having it be interesting. And then, the other piece for me is it's all about people for me, right? Like I truly want to build good, strong, healthy relationships in the world. And when I'm doing that, I feel very good about myself. And that's a lot of the value I get out of the business is these relationships that I have. So, that's the energy piece that you talk about. Like that's the energy that I thrive on. And so I guess, to me, so much of it is just attitude, showing up and bringing the right approach, bringing the right attitude day in and day out to the business for a long time. That's another piece of it is like people come in with these expectations that are difficult to live up to, very difficult to live up to. And then when the business doesn't live up to those, then they start turning a little bit negative or a little bit sour on it. And then that's a really hard ship to turn around, And so, having the right expectations, and showing up with the right attitude, to me, that's just about everything. I mean, I could nuance all that to more detail and stuff, but I think that would be my answer.
Yeah, I think it's great. And you and I share that. My past days have been really good. Today's even better. And I know it'll be even better in the future. This is so exciting, this little journey that we're on. One thing from a just managing expectations standpoint and learning to trust, struggle in rough times. If you're going to get into sales and people don't want to hear no, I know that's difficult, but you can't expect to be good at it right away. So expect 6 months or 1 year of struggle, and it will 100% of the time become fun and you'll get good at it. But if you give up after a week of being told no 30 or 100 times, you're barely even starting. And if somebody's paying you to do it, you're getting paid to go to school, learn how to create value, right?
Yeah. Well, and I always used to love making a game out of it. And so, is it about like how many, if I'm going to start cold calling on a certain product, what's a reasonable number of no's per 100 calls, or a reasonable number of yeses per 100 calls? You don't know when you start. But you're trying to find that answer. And so that's a big part of the game. And so instead of looking at it like, boy, I only sold 3 units out of 100 calls, that's terrible. That might be great. And figure out the equation. And then once you have the equation figured out, then the game becomes super easy. If you sell 3 per 100, well, now you know how many calls you got to make, right? And then you go make those calls, and then the game becomes about trying to get it to 4 out of 100, and then the game becomes about getting it to 5 out of 100, right? And that's that mentality, that gaming mentality, that I just think is critical in sales and in business. And so let's set a goal that by the end of the year we're at 7 sales per 100 calls. Let's do that. Let's figure out how to do that, And if we got to get 21 units sold a week, we know how many calls we got to make. Done. Let's do it.
In my experience is virtually 100% of the time, when you look at it that way, it will be better, right? The ratio, all of it. One thing I want to say here, and we don't have another hour to go into it, but it was so important we talked about earlier, which is this sort of personal audit, this due diligence on yourself. And you list a number of things, be humble, curious, ready to learn, master doses of energy and enthusiasm, be gentle with your internal control freak. I mean, you've got a list of, I think it was probably 12-ish things in there, but I recommend that our listeners read your book, Grind, and look at that, because taking that assessment and visiting it regularly, I think, is super powerful for anybody starting a business, and anybody even with a smaller mid-sized business.
Yeah. I did something called the Grind Score. And so it's thegrindscore.com. It's 24 questions, and you go through and you answer them on a scale of 1 to 10. There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. And, but if you put down a 7 and I think the right answer is a 4, I've written 240 customized answers. So if you gave a 7 and I gave a 3, I'm going to give you on that particular question, my analysis of why a 7 might get in your way in terms of developing the business, right? So again, it's not about yes or no. It's about getting the analysis and evaluating the strengths and weaknesses and so on. And I think it's a great little tool. I did it during COVID, I did, it was like my COVID project or one of them. And so it's a cool thing. It's at thegrindscore.com, and you go in and it doesn't even take 15 minutes. And all I ask for is an email to send you your analysis. And then I get your email at that point and we can stay in touch. And so it's a fun little piece.
Yeah, I love that. If folks want to know more about you, Mike, how can they learn about you, what you're doing?
Well, I mean, right now, michaeljmcfall.com is I mean, I've got my story there, and I've got connections to all my social feeds and everything. So if you want to reach out to me, that's the best place to do it. I put my phone number in all my books. I put my phone number everywhere. I get more engagement than I would think. I mean, people actually reach out, I love the, hey, I'm on my pontoon boat up in northern Minnesota reading your book, and I can't believe, this is my story. And those to me are, I mean, I just love that stuff. When people say, hey, when I read your book, it reminds me of me back when I started my company. And yeah, that's meaningful stuff for me.
Yeah. Well, this has been great for me. I mean, talking with you, you've been there, you've been wildly successful, and you're still in the game, and there's no end to where you could go. I mean, you're one in a million or more. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks for the opportunity. I do appreciate it.
All right. And this has been the Show Your Value podcast. If you got value out of today's episode, please like and leave a review. And until next time, go forward and show your value to the world.